These four celebrities have really tragic backstories most people don't even know about.
I know.
And I'm starting with the world's greatest underdog. I'm talking about the only 8th Division champ in boxing history, the legendary Manny Pacman Pacquiao.
I prove it on my last fight against Matisi, and now I prove it again at age of 40. So Manny Pacquiao's journey is still continue.
You see, life wasn't easy for Manny growing up. His family of 9 crammed into a single-room shack, surviving on whatever his parents could earn from selling coconuts and peanuts. Young Manny was also a shy kid, so he didn't really have a lot of friends. But that all changed the day he stumbled upon a scrappy stray dog in the streets of his neighborhood. The two immediately became best friends, and Manny felt he finally had someone who he deeply cared for. Well, at least for now. One night, Manny's father came home completely hammered after a wild night out with his buddies. He suddenly started yelling at Manny. The poor kid didn't know any better at the time, so he snapped back at him as well. And that's when his dad decided to do something that would haunt Manny for the rest of his life. He killed my dog, Pacquiao revealed in his autobiography. He took the dog I found and killed it. But that's not all. His dad also cooked it and ate it for dinner, and there was nothing 12-year-old Manny could do but to curl his fists and watch. He couldn't bear the thought of spending another day living under the same roof as a dog killer, so he packed his bags and ran away from home.
Outside the street, I sleep in with the carton, the carton, the box. We don't have house, we don't have money to buy food. It's a very good experience that I'm so thankful to God that I haven't experienced that life, before I get this life.
Those were the hardest days in Pac's life. Without a home, he slept in a cardboard box on the streets, and he survived by buying a couple of donuts every day and selling them for some extra coins, until eventually Manny ended up in a big city called Manila, and it was there that he started to hone his skills as a boxer. But thanks to his raw talent and resilience, it didn't take long before he could make a name for himself. Manny was basically the John Wick of the boxing world. His journey was kick-started by watching his dad chew on his pup's paw like it was a drumstick. But hey, just because things started out rough doesn't mean it has to end that way. In 2009, all that hatred in Pac's heart disappeared the moment he saw his father's face again. And just like that, Pacquiao finally put his painful past behind him. Finally, he could introduce his dad to his wife, kids, teammates. Well, not his dogs though. And just like Manny, our next guy had a shit childhood. We live in a society where Joaquin Phoenix is an Academy Award-winning actor. But what if I told you that he may have walked a different line? One that involved preaching the word of God by banging the devil out of their system. You see, before he was Joaquin Phoenix, he was Joaquin Bottom, the middle child of a highly devout Christian missionary couple, Arlene and John Lee Bottom. But here's the thing, noobs. His folks weren't your run-of-the-mill churchgoers though. In the early 70s, the Bottoms and their 5 children were members of a religious group known as the Children of God. This meant that their family would go around singing and dancing on the streets for food while giving out invites to join their nice group of hippies. Problem was, their nice group of hippies was actually a cult led by the depraved David Berg. Berg was later exposed for promoting practices like flirty fishing, aka religious prostitution, to entice new members, as well as encouraging the SA of countless women and children in their commune. In 1977, Joaquin's parents even received a letter from Berg seemingly inviting them to the cult's divine orgy. They soon fled the cult, and despite having practically no money, managed to board a Miami cargo ship where Joaquin would spend his 3rd birthday. Soon after, the Bottoms would change their name to Phoenix to symbolize the new life they wanted for themselves. Eventually, they made their way to Hollywood, where the kids would often get booked as child actors. But as great as an actor as Joaquin already was, he wouldn't be known nationwide until a fun night out with his siblings would turn into one of the most defining scars of Joaquin's life. Now, reports of what happened that night at the Viper Room on October 31st, 1993 are unclear, but what was for sure is that then 19-year-old Joaquin found his older brother Hollywood star River Phoenix convulsing on the sidewalk of the famous nightclub. Their sister Rain did her best to revive River, while Joaquin would go on to make this chilling 911 call.
She's trying to give him mouth to mouth. Please get over here, please. Calm down, okay? I think he's had volume or something. I don't know. Let's get over here, please. Yeah, slow down, okay? Where is the guy? Where the fuck are they, you know? Please get his dog, please.
But 20 minutes after River was delivered to the hospital, Joaquin was told that his brother had died of an accidental overdose. The sudden death of 23-year-old River Phoenix was all over the news. But do you know what wasn't part of the report, Snoobs? How Joaquin and his very private family were hounded by the journos and the paparazzi.
And so during that time in which you're most vulnerable, there are helicopters flying over, there are people that are trying to sneak onto your land. Certainly for me, it felt like it impeded on the mourning process.
So Joaquin stopped acting altogether and yeeted away with his family to Costa Rica. But true to his name, Joaquin rose from the ashes again and made his triumphant return to Hollywood, where he's been method acting all the way to the top ever since.
I know. How about another joke, Murray?
No, I think we've had enough of your jokes.
What do you get
I don't think so.
when you cross
I think
a
we're
mentally
done
ill
with your
loner
jokes.
with
That's
a
it.
society that abandons him and treats him like trash?
Call the police,
I'll
Gene.
tell you what you get.
Call the police.
You get what you fucking deserve.
Winning awards and trolling people along the way. Now that you know Joaquin's story, did you know that the attack on the Twin Towers wasn't the first aviation disaster that happened on 9/11? Eerily enough, there was another 9/11 plane crash that happened 27 years earlier. This incident changed a lot of people's lives, including late-night host Stephen Colbert. When Stephen was just 10 years old, his two older brothers, Peter and Paul, were gonna go to Connecticut to enroll at a new school. Along for the ride was their dad, James Colbert Jr., who was basically the Anthony Fauci of the 70s. So on September 11th, 1974, the three of them boarded Eastern Airlines Flight 212. At first, it was a pretty routine flight until heavy fog started surrounding the plane. Meanwhile, the pilots of the 212 were like kids at a sleepover, too busy chatting about the Arabs and the Nixon-Watergate scandal to even notice that their altitude was off. When the pilots finally did see the ground though, it was already too late. The plane slid through a cornfield where it soon lost a wing and burst into flames, instantly ending the lives of 72 people on board, including Colbert's dad and his two brothers. Needless to say, this broke a cable in Stephen's head, giving his colorful childhood memories a ghostly filter. The worst part, Stephen's mother, Lorna, was left emotionally shattered by the incident. Stephen had no choice but to practically raise his own mother in a dark, quiet house.
In some ways, we were here for her because of her loss of her husband and her children. The seed crystal was make her laugh.
Stephen himself also indulged in some self-care by slacking off at school and escaping into the fantasy world of J.R.R. Tolkien's books. But it wasn't until Stephen was on his own at college that he couldn't keep up the clown act anymore, opening up about how he suffered bouts of sadness at this time. Always the Bible nerd, Stephen turned to his Catholic faith to heal his sorrows. But if that didn't do the trick, he'd purposely put himself into some pretty awkward situations, just for the hell of it. With that in mind, Colbert dove headfirst into the most embarrassing career of them all, comedy. Good call though, because Stephen Colbert would later become one of the titans of late-night talk shows.
Oh, I also got my birthday wish. Donald Trump is still on trial. This week. What week is this? 3, 4? This is 4. This is week 4 of testimony in his faking business records to cover up banging a porn star trial.
Keeping millions of people laughing with his razor-sharp wit, even through these very dark times. And no one understands dark times more than the last guy on our list. When we look at babies, we see them as a symbol of love and commitment between two people. But in the case of award-winning stand-up comedian and former The Daily Show host Trevor Noah, he was a symbol of his parents' terrible crime. You see, when Trevor was born on February January 20th, 1984, South Africa had this little thing called apartheid. You know when you do laundry, you separate the colored clothes from the white ones? That's basically apartheid, but with people. If you've got a darker complexion, you're not allowed to eat, drink, sleep, or even sometimes speak with light-skinned people. And if you dare break that rule, they will send you to jail. It was that serious. So when Trevor's mom, Patricia, started secretly hanging out and getting all cozy with a white man next door named Robert, they were basically asking to get locked behind bars. But as Trevor once joked,
my mom was arrested for being with my dad. She would get fined. She would get thrown into prison for the weekend. But still, she'd come back and she's like, woo, I don't care, I don't care. And my dad was also like, well, you know how the Swiss love chocolate. So he was in there.
And so out of the forbidden Willy Wonka factory came a teeny tiny milk chocolate baby called Trevor Noah. Unfortunately, because he was so obviously not 100% black, his mom would often lie and say she's just Trevor's babysitter whenever they were together. Sometimes they wouldn't even let Trevor out of the house at all, just to keep their neighbors from asking too many questions. So although Trevor's pops tried his best to be part of his son's life, he wasn't really able to build a connection with him. And when his dad left South Africa for good, it was all up to Trevor and his mom to play hide and seek with the neighbors and the South African government. And this whole game lasted 10 whole freaking years until the officials finally abolished apartheid in 1994. Finally, after a whole freaking decade, Trevor and his mom were free. Or so they thought. In 1992, Trevor's mom found a new man in her life, a tall, dark, and handsome man named Abel. But make no mistake, he was no Prince Charming in their love story. Instead, he became their own form of prison. Anytime Trevor and his mom would do something Abel didn't like, he would use his fist to teach them a lesson. And it lasted for 4 horrible years, until 1996, when Patricia finally decided to divorce his scummy ass and leave him for another more loving man named Sophiso. As you can already expect, this made Abel freaking angry, so he decided to do the unspeakable. It was a beautiful Sunday morning in 2009. Patricia was in the car getting ready to go to a local church with her family when suddenly a familiar face pulled up to their front porch. It was Abel. Her heart immediately sank to her chest, but before she could even tell her kids to run back inside the house, 2 loud bangs rang out in the area. Patricia slumped over the steering wheel, and one of her sons immediately rushed her to a nearby hospital, and it was there that they found out that one bullet had ripped through the back of her head and burst right out of her nose. But for some unbelievable reason, the same bullet missed her brain, her spinal cord, and all the major arteries in her head. I mean, how mind-blowing is that? And guess what? She actually survived the whole thing. Now, if you're wondering what happened to Abel after his failed hitman stunt, well, brace yourselves for this one, because despite all of the awful things he's done to Trevor and his family, he never spent a single second behind bars. He was only sentenced to 3 years probation. Yep. They basically gave him a slap on the wrist and they let him go so he could continue terrorizing Trevor's family. So, out of fear for his life, Trevor bounced out of South Africa and headed straight for Los Angeles. Shortly after stepping foot in America, Trevor found his calling, making people piss their pants in laughter. And in just a couple of years, he went from a nobody telling jokes at random comedy clubs to one of the biggest names in the industry of comedy.
When you watch Donald Trump, does he remind you a little bit of Egyptian leaders? Like, I feel like Trump would be exactly the same even if he spoke Arabic. It would be like the same thing. It'd be like,
well, I guess you could say blowing up is in their genes, huh? That's enough trauma dumping for today, noobs. Just remember, when life gives you lemons, punch life in the dick and be grateful that your dad didn't eat your dog.